Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 19th of October 2015, the podcast that's glad you didn't say banana. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again is Jakob Morris. Jacob, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back.
Before we get started, there's something I wanted to get you all up to speed on since I've been hawking LastPass for a while as a wonderful way to manage your passwords and online security. A lot of people have hit the ceiling this week with the news that LastPass has been acquired by LogMeIn. And the interesting thing about security geeks is that there's a tendency to go from reactionary to knee-jerk pretty much at the drop of a hat, and this was a pretty big hat to drop, so lots of people are crying that the sky is falling and they'll never use LastPass again, so I thought I'd kind of bring everyone down to earth and just let you know everything I've been able to determine. First of all, I don't see any reason to panic at all. I'm still using LastPass. I'm still recommending it. Although it's good to keep an eye on things, regardless of whether or not they've been bought or whoever. So if LogMeIn starts doing anything that threatens the integrity of LastPass as a security product, I'll be sure to let y'all know here on this podcast. But the LastPass team are still on the case. CEO and co-founder Joe Sigrist assured everyone that he was still in charge of LastPass and everything will remain as it is. Quote, "I want to personally assure you that this is good news for our users. First of all, we, LogMeIn/LastPass, have no plans to change our existing business model. Secondly, this acquisition provides us with access to resources that will enable us to innovate faster as we continue to strive to deliver an even better product than the one you've come to know and love. It is also important to note that the current LastPass team is staying in place and remains committed to deliver on the promise of privacy, security, and convenience that has been our mission since day one. I appreciate and am proud of the passion of our community and will continue to work hard to maintain your deep loyalty." Also, marketing manager Terry Nguyen responded to several comments from concerned users. Quote, "We understand your concern, but this is good news. Great product developments are to come, and there will be no change to the status of LastPass users. We'll continue as a freemium service. We're joining LogMeIn, but the LastPass team will continue to lead the strategy and development of the product, and we remain committed to our promise of security. This acquisition provides us access to resources to build and improve features of our free, premium, and enterprise customers." Now, a lot of people have remarked that a few months ago, LogMeIn bought Meldium, which is a commercial team-based password solution, so LogMeIn may just be interested in integrating LastPass into that and its remote login technologies, while hopefully leaving the LastPass team to deal with LastPass. There are some concerns this might be an acqui-hire, where you acquire the talent and not really the product, and some people are afraid that might take them off LastPass to use for other projects. I don't really see a problem with that as long as they're still in charge of LastPass. LastPass, for the most part, I think, is pretty much a finished product, so all they really need to do is stay on top of that. But I think the bottom line that's got people worried is LastPass is trustworthy, LogMeIn isn't. LogMeIn has bought other technologies like Hamachi that were free and then years later said, okay, it's not free anymore, we're going to make you pay for it. But I think as long as Joe Sigrist is in charge, it'll be good. I'm going to kind of use him as my canary in a coal mine. If he ever ends up leaving LogMeIn, that'll be where I start to pay a lot of close attention. So anyway, just wanted to hopefully allay everyone's fears on that. So now let's quantum lock this week's news of the bogus. So we have a confirmation of something we predicted long ago, that the launch of Netflix in Australia would mean a drop in online piracy of movies and TV shows. Now, some new statistics from the IP Awareness Foundation has confirmed that, yes, in the time that Netflix has been legally available in Australia, piracy has, in fact, dropped.
Yeah, what did take so long for Netflix to drop in Australia?
Well, it was just so much opposition from the content providers there.
Right.
And it got to the point where Australians were buying VPN software to connect to America and watch the American version of Netflix, and they were hitting the ceiling about that, and Netflix was like, well, just let us come there legally. So yeah, it's just crazy. It's like they're determined to shoot themselves in the foot.
Well, life finds a way.
So this is a survey of 1,265 Australians age 18 to 64. According to their responses, piracy dropped 29% in the previous year, and 33% of them, a full third, said that cheap legal alternatives were the main reason why, more than any other individual category. And of those who said they were taking advantage of the free trial, 2/3 of them said that they intend to pay for continuing service when their trial period's over.
Yeah, I know from experience that Netflix is a lot easier to use than pirate stuff. I mean, forget I said that.
We won't turn you in. But yeah, it is, and it's like if you pirate a movie, you have to wait for the whole friggin' thing to download. You can't just, watch it right then and there. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what quality it's going to be. You don't know if there's malware that's coming along for the ride or anything like that. So people are willing to pay for that as long as it's a reasonable amount.
Yeah, piracy is really just a service problem.
Oh, yeah. Now, of those who are still pirating, there's been a drop in the portion of them who are persistent pirates. So the pirates who are left are less likely to use piracy as a consistent way of getting content, meaning that a greater portion of pirates are just doing it occasionally, just for the things they can't get legally on Netflix or elsewhere, and they say that they're pirating less often as well. For the first time, piracy fell below 50% for the age group that pirates the most, the 18 to 24 group, so in no age group is piracy the norm anymore, although this group is still twice as likely to pirate as the average Australian.
Well, now it is.
For now, yeah. It all depends on where they go from here. As long as they encourage more streaming and video on demand services like Netflix, the more this will happen, the more they try to fight them, the more they'll get blowback.
Yeah, I won't hold my breath.
But there is some Bogosity from Executive Director Lori Flexer, quote, "Piracy has always needed a range of measures to tackle the problem. As we all know, there is no silver bullet. This fall in piracy rates is definitely largely attributable to the combination of the government's new legislation plus the ongoing efforts of the creative industries to continue delivering great content at accessible prices to Australian consumers and the work being done to educate consumers about the impact of copyright theft." Well, she is giving her government way too much credit there.
Yes.
Only 13% said that they stopped pirating because of fear of being caught, and if you actually go and look at the report, that 13% also includes people who were fearful for other reasons, such as getting malware on their computers, and they don't even separate out the legislation component.
Well, politicians have magic powers when they write on pieces of paper.
Yeah, I'm sure it was that and not what a full third of them said it was. She also said, quote, "Strong copyright laws are needed to ensure the vibrancy and growth of the creative sector, which in turn contributes to the economy, provides jobs, and stimulates local culture. Copyright facilitates innovation rather than hinders it." Except that's the exact opposite of what her organization's data show. It was those ridiculous laws that stopped companies like Netflix from coming in for so long. And even then, many of them are in opposition to Netflix providing the same offerings they do in America and other countries. This survey shows it's overwhelmingly cheap legal options that are the best defense for piracy.
Yeah, I don't think they're in any position to be accurate.
Yeah, but really, they should be arguing for fewer barriers to video on demand services. That's what this data says. Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. More good news on the Fourth Amendment front. California just passed strong warrant requirements for digital data on cell phones and other devices. And this is the California Electronic Communications Privacy Act, CalECPA, signed by Governor Jerry Brown, also known as SB 178. which requires state law enforcement to get a warrant before they can access any electronic information about who someone is or where they go, what their connections are, who they know, what they're doing, things like that. The ACLU is calling this a landmark win. Their Technology and Civil Liberties Policy Director, Nicole Ozer, said, quote, "This is a landmark win for digital privacy and all Californians. We hope this is a model for the rest of the nation in protecting our digital privacy rights."
Yeah, this is probably something I would like to export from California.
Yeah, a couple of other states, Utah and Maine, have similar laws, but they aren't really as strong as this one. This one, they really juiced up the protections.
Yeah, we'll take this, and you can keep all the SJWs.
Yeah, and all the other legislation we've been talking about. Yeah, something good from California for once.
Well, they also have raisins.
Yeah, they can keep those too.
Aw.
They have the Mythbusters. We'll give them that. They have the Mythbusters.
They have the Mythbusters.
And this was actually a bipartisan bill. It was sponsored by Democratic Senator Mark Leno and Republican Senator Joel Anderson. And a joint article they published said, quote, "Technology has advanced exponentially, but California's privacy laws are still stuck in the digital dark ages. Law enforcement is increasingly taking advantage of outdated privacy laws to turn mobile phones into tracking devices and access sensitive emails, digital documents, and text messages without proper judicial oversight." And this came as 82% of Californians vocally supported ending warrantless digital information searches. So, yeah, by the time it gets up to 82%, they'll finally do something about it. Gay marriage only took 56%, but it's got to be 82% for this.
Yeah, you really get more change when you sway public opinion more than voting.
Yeah, but it's really the case that public opinion has to browbeat them over the head before they'll do anything. I mean, everyone talks about democracy is 51% telling the other 49% what to do. Well, apparently, when it comes to keeping us free, you need a lot more than 51%.
And then it's not a guarantee.
Yeah. So according to the co-authors, in 2014, AT&T received more than 64,000 demands for location information, Verizon more than 15,000 demands in the first half of 2014, and only 1/3 of those came with a warrant. And Senator Leno said, quote, "That ends today with the governor's signature of CalECPA, a carefully crafted law that protects personal information of all Californians. The bill also ensures that law enforcement officials have the tools they need to continue to fight crime in the digital age." Which just boils down to what Rand Paul said, get a warrant. Chris Christie acted like that was some radical idea. Now, they did have a few exceptions here, but I think they're pretty reasonable. If police or another government entity believe that a device is lost or stolen, they can access the device to determine who it belongs to and possibly contact them and say, "Hey, I found your phone." Also, if, quote, "an emergency involving danger of death or serious physical injury to any person requires access to the electronic device information." Again, something else that's reasonable. And the nice thing about this is, even if one of those exceptions is triggered, whoever is doing the search will have 3 days from the time they obtain the data to file for a warrant. So, I mean, it's not one of those cases where, oh, well, they're just going to say it's an exception and not get the warrant and do it. They have to, after the fact, go and get the warrant if they trigger one of these exceptions. So that's nice. I like that aspect of it. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. Back when the movie The Siege was being made, it was panned in part because people thought the US government would never resort to torture even in the face of terrorist attacks. Then 9/11 happened, and the torture began, complete with the newspeak phrase, enhanced interrogation techniques. And this was carried out by the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. military. Obama put a stop to only the CIA doing this, so the others are apparently continuing. But now, a few of the survivors of CIA torture are suing the psychologists who designed the program. And that's James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, who convinced the CIA to subject these suspects to things like mock drowning, which we call waterboarding, painful body contortions, sleep and dietary deprivation, and other things that the rest of the world long ago rejected as torture. It also included disappearances, mock executions, anal penetration under the guise of rehydration.
Wait, what?
And at least one man who froze to death.
Okay, that escalated.
Yeah. And if you recall last year, I think we covered this, a lot of this came out in the Senate report with all of the details of what was going on. And of course, the politicians said, how dare they release that report and not how dare they torture people.
Don't you know it's illegal to reveal the illegal activities the government is doing?
Yeah. So the ACLU filed a suit on behalf of torture survivors, and they are not going to survive my attempt to pronounce their name probably, but I'll give it a shot. Suleiman Abdullah Salim and Mohammed Ahmed bin Saud. And there was a representative of the estate of Gul Rahman, and he was the one who froze to death that I mentioned earlier at the CIA black site in Afghanistan. And so they filed a suit in federal court seeking compensatory damages of at least $75,000, which seems a little small to me, but hey. They called the torture program, quote, joint criminal enterprise, and they also said it was a, quote, war crime. And they said that the CIA colluded with Mitchell and Jessen to do this, and Mitchell and Jessen financially profited from it.
What, did they hold bets on who would die, or what?
No, they were like paid.
Oh.
They were like paid to do this. And paid for their participation. Yeah. So one of the ACLU attorneys, Stephen Watts, said, quote, this case is about ensuring that the people behind the torture program are held accountable so history doesn't repeat itself. Impunity for torture sends the dangerous message to U.S. and foreign officials that there will be no consequences for future abuses. This lawsuit is different from past ones because public government documents now provide exhaustive details on the CIA torture program, and they identify the people who were tortured and how it happened. The government has long abused the state secrets privilege to prevent accountability for torture, but at this stage, any claim that the torture of our clients is a state secret would be absurd. And they mentioned one of the litigants, I think this was Salim, was kept naked for over a month, subjected to a form of waterboarding, and is having flashbacks from his ordeal permanently. They released him in August of 2008 and gave him a memo saying that the U.S. determined that he was no longer a threat. That's just it. Not even an apology. Nothing. Yep. Turns out you're not a threat. Just go home.
Yeah, I have nothing.
And Salim said, quote, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't smell. And he also described how they chained his arms and legs to a metal hoop and forced him into a squatting position so uncomfortable it prevented him from sleeping. He was doused in ice-cold water, wrapped in a freezing plastic sheet, and he kept hiding painkillers he was given to try and hoard a big enough dose to kill himself with. Obviously, that was ultimately unsuccessful because he's still around, but he says, quote, flashbacks come anytime, so much they make you crazy. And Ben Saud says that he only sleeps for minutes at a time because of painful stress positions, constant blaring music, and guards banging loudly on the door of his cell every hour or so. They also paraded him naked around the black site for 15 minutes every half hour through the night and into the morning. I mean, the movie The Siege has nothing on this. No one predicted this.
Yeah, I think the closest media thing I can think of is Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. It had this kind of situation. You had this prison camp that was torturing people. Some of it was really over the top.
But then some of the things we've seen described are over the top too.
Yeah.
So Jessen and Mitchell got involved in this in 2002. The CIA captured Abu Zubaydah. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to try to pronounce it any better than that. He was thought to be a senior member of Al-Qaeda. He was taken to Thailand, apparently to a black site. He talked openly with the interrogators, trying to get them to see his side and trying to let them know what he was all about. Mitchell cabled the CIA's counterterrorism center nearly every day to get permission to torture him. He was waterboarded 83 times in the span of a month. They forced him into confinement boxes, one of which was the size of a coffin, and the other just 2.5 feet square and 21 inches deep. He is now missing an eye. He's still detained at Guantanamo Bay, but the CIA no longer believes he's a member of Al-Qaeda.
So, no memo? No, you can go home now?
Nope, he didn't even get the memo. And when the Justice Department looked at this, an advisor to Condoleezza Rice told her that this amounted to a felony war crime. Of course, Rice didn't do anything about it. She just kept ordering it that it be continued. And so, like I said, they're seeking $75,000 in damages, but Mitchell and Jess and Associates got $75 million from the CIA in contracts, in addition to another $6.1 million for legal expenses in the event of criminal or civil action stemming from the contract. And they each individually received more than $1 million from their contracts as well. And the suit charges, quote, defendants are directly liable because they designed, developed, and implemented a program for the CIA intended to inflict physical and mental pain and suffering on plaintiffs, and because plaintiffs were tortured and subjected to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment as a consequence of their inclusion into that program. Personally, I really want to see him nail him to the wall over this.
Wait, literally?
Well, no, not literally. That would be torturous. But
Oh, we don't want that.
yeah, set a good precedent for future cases.
Right.
Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now let's block cipher this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And believe it or not, we haven't given it to FBI Director James Comey until now, and you can guess what it's for. Even after the Obama administration has backed down and said that it won't call for encryption backdoors, Comey's keeping at it, including recently to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. When the committee asked him directly how many terror suspects FBI agents have lost because of encryption, he said, quote, probably the best number I can give in an open setting is dozens. Gee, could you be a little more vague, please? I mean, if you want to convince someone of this, maybe you should come up with some better information.
Yeah, I don't think they're in a position to be accurate.
Probably not, but I mean, if you're going to pull something out of your ass, you might as well pull an actual number out, 84! That's how you do that. And committee chairman Ron Johnson wasn't impressed either, quote, I'm a little concerned about numbers, but I will say I'm surprised if it's only a couple dozen people who have been inspired by social media and then moved into encrypted accounts.
Yeah, that's in kind of like a low number.
Yeah, if it's only dozens, I gotta wonder what they're talking about. But listen to this bit, quote, when they find a live one, they will move them off. This is Comey again. When they find a live one, they will move them off Twitter and move them to an end-to-end encrypted messaging app. And then he whined that the FBI couldn't read the message without a warrant. Now, I don't know if he's an idiot or if he's saying more than he wanted to, but if it's a true end-to-end encryption app with no backdoors like TextSecure, then warrant or no, you can't read the message at all without the cooperation of at least one participant.
Cyberpunk future, take me away.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I've got a warrant. Oh, okay, well, if you've got a warrant, then I'm going to change the way mathematics works. Yeah. So it looks like he's really complaining about the warrant requirements, not anything else. But either way, he just falsified everything he's been saying this whole time, and it really is about the bother of getting a warrant, and everything else is just an excuse.
Why should I have to ask permission to violate people's rights?
Yeah, and why should he actually have to obey the oath he swore to the Constitution.
Well, if you don't like it, you can just move to Talsahir, or whatever that place is called.
Talsahir?
You know that conversation with Veriparius, where he told us to go to an unclaimed spot of land in somewhere in Africa?
Oh, yeah. Just stick with Somalia, guys. Yeah, don't impress us by picking another obscure portion of the world that you don't know the first thing about. So that has to make James Comey this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. However, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplex Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplexbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now let's wave collapse this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Yeah, there are probably going to be more presidential candidates getting this as time goes on, and this week it goes to Ben Carson. And it's a shame because Carson is actually quite an intelligent guy. He's a skilled neurosurgeon who successfully separated Siamese twins conjoined at the head, which is something few neurosurgeons can do. That's nothing to sneeze at. But when he gets outside his field of expertise, he lets superstition cloud his sense of reality, and that is not a good sign. And this comes from Donald Prothero, writing for Skeptic.com, and he references a speech that Carson made to a group of Seventh-day Adventists in 2011, and Carson himself is a Seventh-day Adventist. Quote, "I find the Big Bang really quite fascinating. I mean, here you have all these highfalutin scientists, and they're saying this was this gigantic explosion, and everything came into perfect order. Now, these are the same scientists that go around touting, okay, place your bets now on what he's going to say next. You probably won't get that much for winning. The second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy, which says that things move toward a state of disorganization. So now you're going to have this big explosion, and everything becomes perfectly organized. And when you ask them about it, they say, well, we can explain this based on probability theory because if there's enough big explosions over a period of time, billions and billions of years, one of them will be the perfect explosion." And then he goes right in with the 747 argument. So that is not at all what they say.
Yeah, the universe isn't really that orderly to begin with.
Yeah.
It's a crazy chaotic place. Nature red in tooth and claw.
Well, and so much of what we have, the matter that we have in the galaxy and planets and things like that, it's there because of this little interplay between order and chaos. It kind of happens on that border. So you really need both. But Victor Stenger actually did a good job of explaining in God the Failed Hypothesis what it was about the second law of thermodynamics and how that relates to the Big Bang. So when the universe was young, it was really, really small, which means the potential for entropy was small as well. As the universe gets bigger and bigger, the potential for entropy gets bigger. And if we're going to call entropy disorder, which is not a very good word for it, but we'll go with it for the time being, then you can think of the potential for disorder minus the actual amount of disorder in the universe as being equal to the amount of order in the universe. Makes sense, right? So as the universe has expanded, yes, the amount of disorder has increased, but the potential for disorder has been increasing at a greater rate. Now, at some point, that's going to kind of peter out and level off, and then those curves will meet at some point, something like 100 trillion years in the future, and that's where you have the heat death of the universe. But, I mean, again, this information is out there, and they just don't even bother looking.
Yeah, it's too hard.
And you can probably guess from his comments on the second law of thermodynamics that he isn't a big fan of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution as well. In fact, he said it was encouraged by the devil.
El Satan.
And he actually kind of collided the two together in an interesting sort of nonsense particle collision with global climate change. Quote, "Is there climate change? Of course there's climate change. Any point in time, temperatures are going up or temperatures are going down. Of course that's happening. When that stops happening, that's when we're in big trouble." Actually, it sounds kind of like he acknowledges chaos theory there, but anyway. As far as evolution is concerned, I do believe in microevolution or natural selection. In other words, evolution. Because there's nothing about evolution that isn't that, but we've gone through that before. But anyway, quote, "But I believe that God gave the creatures he made the ability to adapt to their environment." Yeah, tell that to the dinosaurs. Tell that to the dodo.
Yeah, I want to sound reasonable without being reasonable.
Yeah. Because he's very smart and he didn't want to start over every 50 years. Just the way the Earth rotates on its axis, how far away it is from the sun. These are all very complex things. Gravity, where did it come from?
Gravitons?
I haven't quite confirmed the graviton yet, but I think space tells matter how to move, and matter tells space how to curve. I think I read that somewhere.
No, we don't know yet.
Well, we did find the Higgs particles, so that's a big part of the way there. So he talks a bit about his Seventh-day Adventism, quote, "If the media mention Carson's faith at all, they just casually toss in a mention of Seventh-day Adventists, SDA, as if it were just another branch of Christianity. But SDA are a strange cult-like fringe group, like the Mormons and Christian Scientists, who really don't share much with mainstream Christianity. The SDA are a remnant of the old Millerite revival movement of the early 1840s. And he summarized this. It's fairly popular. William Miller was a preacher at the time. And he predicted the Advent, which is the second coming of Christ, the rapture, the book of Revelation, and everything.
William Miller was a prophet. Dum, 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 dum.
It was going to happen sometime in 1844. I mean, we've lived through this a couple of times. The end of the world 2012 prophecy, and then the one a couple of years ago with that guy who just kept, it died a spiritual death.
I think there was one a month ago at least.
Yeah, there was one about the supermoon, yeah. This keeps happening. But I mean, these guys, they like sold all their property, they gave up everything they have, and then, of course, the world didn't end. And this is actually called the Great Disappointment, if you want to Google that and read more about it. So, did they give up their faith and admit they were wrong? Of course not. Not even hideous failure can do that. Quote, "Instead, most of the Millerites splintered into groups, one of which was led by prophetess Ellen G. White and became the SDA Church in 1863. The SDA Church is very powerful and active and is the 12th largest religious body in the world with over 18 million members. SDAs are among the most virulent of all creationist groups, since the prophetess herself was a rabid creationist, typical of her time." And really, pretty much all of the things that young Earth creationists say, and people like Ken Ham and Kent Hovind of those, all of that pretty much comes from this early Seventh-day Adventist church, this tiny little offshoot of Christianity. And he also talks about the interesting state of education in medical schools and in pre-med programs.
What, are they teaching too much facts?
Quote, "My good friend Dr. Melvin Moss, who was the chair of anatomy of the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons when I took classes from him in the 1970s, used to tell us horror stories of the narrow focus of med students who had no interest or curiosity in anything they were learning. They were just suffering through anatomy to get through the ordeal of med school. It was for this reason that my good friend, classmate, and co-author Neil Shubin wrote the best-selling book, Your Inner Fish, which emerged from his own attempt to give med school anatomy an evolutionary context." And that is an excellent book, by the way, another one for your reading list. And I once heard a physics professor say that he actually got better results teaching pre-law students than pre-med. The pre-med students just weren't at all interested in it because they didn't see what physics had to do with what they wanted to learn. The pre-law students were wanting to learn everything because when you're doing law, you never know what kind of knowledge might come in handy. So
yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah, so having an MD doesn't really mean you've got a good, well-rounded scientific education. So he finishes this off by talking about cognitive dissonance. Quote, "We are all exposed to ideas that often contradict things that we already accept, but our brains are so compartmentalized, Michael Shermer describes it as logic-tight compartments, that we can let these contradictory notions exist side by side." And I mean, we've seen that in plenty of other things too, in pretty much every subject we cover on this podcast, in fact. And he says, quote, "Extremely literalistic religious beliefs are central to their existence and give their lives meaning. Anytime they encounter facts about the world that threaten their core religious beliefs, they fall back on various ad hoc explanations, which is most of the contorted thinking you find in creationist apologetics, denying the facts themselves, or simply ignoring what doesn't fit their worldview. Ben Carson was deeply indoctrinated at a young age, so when he entered science classes, he simply shut out or ignored anything like evolution or cosmology that might threaten his viewpoint, and memorized what he needed to learn for the test without letting any of its implications threaten his religious extremism. Well, sadly, Ben Carson isn't at all atypical among Republican candidates, but it is
Or Democrats.
Or Democrats, yes. But it is enough to get him named this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this Time for Go to Bed edition of the Bogosity podcast. As always, you can come to forum.bogosity.tv to read the show notes and join the discussion. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or at patreon.bogosity.tv, and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. You can even stick in an audio file if you want. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Jakob Morris for joining me.
You're welcome.
Until next time, here's a quote from Edward Snowden. Some might say, I don't care if they violate my privacy, I've got nothing to hide. Help them understand that they are misunderstanding the fundamental nature of human rights. Nobody needs to justify why they need a right. The burden of justification falls on the ones seeking to infringe upon the right. Arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Imported License.
Bogosity.
Christmas time is coming, and the most classic of Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol. But how much do you know about the original Charles Dickens novella? Have you dismissed it as a children's book with one-dimensional characters amounting to nothing but platitudes and cliches? Maybe your appreciation of the book was even muted by those dry, boring, annotated books they made you read in school. My book, the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, uses both facts and humor to present the book in a way you probably haven't seen it before. Giving praise when deserved and beratement when warranted, this book is put in the perspective of its time and shows a dimensional, multi-layered Ebenezer Scrooge from start to finish. Skepticism, history, and even economics are employed to show the book in relation to today in an easily accessible format. Appreciate the Christmas of your youth all over again. Get the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, available at Amazon and on PDF as well.
So if you want a spoiler as to who's going to win the election in 2016, I'd go to PredictIt. Seems like Hillary is way ahead in the lead.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Well, Democrats do...
Was this before or after the debates?
After the debates.
Oh, boy.
Well, Democrats do tend to spend less than Republicans, oddly enough. So there's that.
That doesn't really mean anything.
Well, you know, she's got the name recognition and the first woman in the White House gimmick, so it's hard to win against that.
Yeah. And apparently lots and lots of Teflon.
Well, Bernie Sanders seemed to be complaining and saying that Bernie Sanders won the debate. That the media saying Hillary won because she owned donating to her. Or something like that. Bernie Sanders is awesome because he only has labor unions that are donating to him. Because that's different.
Yeah.
They represent the people, even though labor unions only make up a small percentage of workers.
Yeah.